On this Saturday night, long weekend warnings. Climbing temperatures fuel dangerous conditions in BC and Alberta.
We're seeing a wide range of catastrophic changes in our ecosystems.
The impact on humans and wildlife. Anger in Alberta. Residents and doctors protest the province's plan to drop mandatory COVID-19 health measures. Pandemic perks. Employers get creative to attract more staff. And billion-dollar blunder.
It's one of the most expensive highways in the world.
Why this road to nowhere has left Montenegro at the mercy of Beijing.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Eric Sorensen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. As Canadians try to enjoy one of summer's most beloved weekends, extreme weather is making it difficult for many. Just as July began with heat warnings, British Columbians and Albertans are now heading into August with more heat warnings. A summer of dangerously high temperatures and little to no rain. The record-breaking heat is putting a strain on both humans and wildlife. Jayme Doll has our top story tonight.
One of the most dangerous things during a heat wave is social isolation.
Scorching and dangerously high temperatures are once again sweeping across Western Canada. British Columbia is ramping up its efforts to prevent a repeat of last month's tragedy. More than 500 people died of heat-related illnesses in just 1 week.
All of our health authorities have all their systems on emergency footing to help anyone who might experience heat or smoke-related challenges.
The persistent and unprecedented heat domes helping to fuel wildfires in BC and the Prairie provinces. Adding to the discomfort of the heat, thick smoke parked over many communities.
That smoke causes irritation and it can cause inflammation that affects the entire body.
Vancouver's Stanley Park is so parched, the city decided to close it during overnight hours to mitigate ignition.
Right now, some of our concerns are simple things as just cigarette butts being thrown around. Or people doing barbecues or taking things like that into the park. But after hours, it could go perhaps too long before it's detected, and by then it could be something that's, severe.
The weather not only impacting humans, normally frigid mountain lakes in Alberta are now bearable to swim in. But the rising water temperatures are threatening aquatic life.
Right now, lakes in Canada are warming at twice the global average. And this has tremendous impacts on its ecosystems, particularly fish. We're seeing a wide range of catastrophic changes in our ecosystems as these high temperatures persist. And at present, we now see 5 major heat domes forming again in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're not anywhere near through this.
Environmentalists say this is climate change, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg. Jayme Doll, Global News, Banff.
The weather is creating volatile wildfire conditions across the western half of the country. There are 141 active fires burning in northwestern Ontario. In Manitoba, there are 152 fires. Saskatchewan is reporting 119 today. There are 58 burning in Alberta. And BC, still bearing the brunt of the tinder-dry conditions, is battling 243 active wildfires. For many residents living in BC's interior, the wildfire danger can cause immense stress, especially when an evacuation order comes in. Homeowners have to leave not knowing what will be there when they return. Global's Lauren Pullen reports.
Right there.
As she walks through what's left of her backyard, Celia George can clearly see how close her life came to changing forever. The unforgiving flames of the Inchmeep Creek wildfire near Osoyoos, BC came within meters of her home. She was an hour north of town when the fire broke out.
I was at the hospital when I first got the call. And my husband's in there and we've been going through a rough time already for a while.
George's nephew was watching over the house while she was at her husband's bedside.
That is where the fire started.
Ellie Bent believes the wildfire began behind his aunt's home. He and his son did everything they could to fend off the fast-moving flames.
We're wetting down the roof and stuff like that, and just preparing for the fire to come down. It was just like in a rolling motion. It came down the hill, and that's, as fast as it could. It was bright. It was burning hot, and it was scary. It's just like I didn't know if this house was going to be here.
Bent knows firsthand just how merciless Mother Nature can be. He and his family were forced to flee the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire in Alberta. Their house survived the firestorm, and thanks to the quick action by fire crews in this fight, his aunt's house was also spared.
From up here, you can really get a clear picture of the tremendous efforts of those fire crews. You can see that fire actually burned a complete circle around the house, but thanks to firefighters' incredible work, the home was left untouched by flames.
And I want to just really put my hands up to all those ones that helped save our home here. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much from our hearts.
A family forever grateful after wildfire nearly tore apart their world. Lauren Pullen, Global News, near Osoyoos, BC.
There was a call for justice in the nation's capital today for the victims of Canada's residential school system.
No pride in genocide! No pride in genocide!
Protesters marched from Parliament Hill to the Justice Department building, demanding an independent investigation. It was led by NDP MPs Mumulak Kakak and Charlie Angus, who are calling on the federal government to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate what they see as crimes against humanity.
We cannot move on until we have justice, till we recognize the crime against humanity to try and destroy a people, because the people are still here and they are not going anywhere.
This is not about us. This is about our children. This is about individuals who lived and continue to live through horrors, through traumas.
That rally follows the recent discoveries of hundreds of unmarked graves at former residential school sites in several provinces. Now to the COVID-19 pandemic. People in New Brunswick are no longer subject to restrictions as the province moves into its green phase of recovery. As of midnight, there are no more limits on gatherings. Social distancing rules come to an end, and masks are not mandatory anywhere. The province moved ahead with the plan despite falling short of its goal of fully vaccinating 75% of the eligible population. Right now, 67% of eligible people have received both doses. New Brunswick is easing restrictions as health officials across the country raise red flags about the highly transmissible Delta variant, fueling a new wave in the months ahead. Nationally, the average number of daily new cases is just starting to tick upwards again. After the two big waves last winter and spring, COVID case numbers fell in July to the lowest level since last summer. Public health officials now expect a fourth wave. Vaccines should reduce the severity and keep numbers from skyrocketing, but doctors are worried because the Delta variant is so contagious. Alberta, which has the highest number of active cases in the country, is set not only to end its pandemic protocols, but also to stop contact tracing, to stop isolation requirements, and limit testing to people who are hospitalized. As Michael King reports, the plan is prompting a big backlash.
You are choosing to put people at risk by reducing reasonable protections.
That's the message shared by those gathering in downtown Calgary and at the legislature in Edmonton on Saturday, hundreds calling on Alberta's government to reverse its decision to change the rules around COVID-19.
Starting on August 16th, we will no longer recommend that all those with mild symptoms seek testing. Isolation will no longer be universally, legally required if you test positive for COVID-19.
For Natasha Brubaker, whose child is considered high risk for the virus, these decisions hit close to home.
Our children are, by definition, vulnerable. They have no option to protect themselves beyond these health measures and the decisions made by the adults they are counting on to care for them.
Dr. Joe Vipond, an emergency room physician, is going further, saying the rolling back of restrictions goes against Canadians' right to life, liberty, and security.
I call on the Attorney General of Canada to reach out to our Premier and say that you are not allowed to violate the charter rights of 4.5 million Albertans.
In response to the pushback, Alberta's health minister pointed to the rise in those vaccinated, even though Alberta is below the national rate in both first and second doses.
We're trying to do it in a thoughtful way, in a staged approach based on really important metrics and milestones that were developed that are based on the science and based on the data.
For Dr. Joe Vipond, that response is not enough, and he's calling on Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health to resign.
It's quite evident now that public health is not actually putting in policies to protect the health of the public. I think this is a travesty, and I think she should resign.
For those like Natasha Brubaker, they just want to see the province at least maintain the status quo when it comes to testing, tracing, and isolation.
I'm not suggesting a lockdown or reducing store capacity or closing restaurants. I am asking for reasonable steps to be taken to protect them and to prevent illness, deaths, and possibly having to close our schools again.
Michael King, Global News, Calgary.
The fight against COVID is far from over in the U.S., but the pandemic protections for renters are. Until now, landlords weren't allowed to evict tenants who fell behind on their payments during the pandemic. But Congress failed to pass a last-minute extension of the moratorium before it expired today. Now, millions of Americans could lose their homes during a dangerous surge of the virus. Jennifer Johnson reports.
Congresswoman Cori Bush spent the night on the steps of the U.S. Capitol after lawmakers failed to extend the federal moratorium on evictions. Bush knows the struggle all too well, having been evicted 3 times and forced to live in a car with her 2 children.
We need the powers that be to understand that we're not just going to let this go quietly when the lives of actual people, like human beings, actually are at risk.
Latest figures from the U.S. Census Bureau show 10 million Americans are behind in their rent. The Bumpus family is among them after Jeremy was laid off in January.
I'm from California, so I'm not from here, so I don't really have no backup plan or no plan B. I don't have family and friends.
Congressional leaders are encouraging states and local governments to distribute $47 billion in federal money allocated to help tenants. But as of June 30th, only $3 billion had been given out.
The bad news is that the money is getting out very slowly. Some places it's not getting out at all, and it will not reach all the renters who need it to stay stably housed in time.
The eviction moratorium ends at a time when COVID-19 cases are surging again, rising in almost every state, but skyrocketing in places with the least vaccinated people.
This virus can spread like crazy. We're trying to counter vaccines, but we're not winning. 100,000 cases on Friday.
The Centers for Disease Control says the war has changed with this new highly transmissible variant. Companies from Disneyland to Walmart are now issuing new mask guidelines. But this week, vaccinations went up after months of pleading from the Biden administration.
Almost 1 million people got vaccinated. About 500,000 of those people for the first time. I'm hopeful that people are beginning to realize how essential it is.
Doctors are telling Americans vaccines remain their best protection. Currently, 97% of all hospitalizations and 99% of all deaths from COVID-19 are among the unvaccinated. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
COVID-19 continues to cast a shadow over the Olympics. New daily cases in host city Tokyo just hit a record high, 4,058. That didn't deter people from defying a ban on spectators at the Olympics. Crowds of masked fans gathered to watch the triathlon mixed relay race. 241 COVID cases have been linked to the Games so far. Coming up, the Canadian companies offering persuasive perks to battle a labor shortage. Canada's economy is slowly reopening, yet many industries still face a labor shortage. The pandemic is allowing a lot of workers to rethink the jobs they have and the ones they really want. And that's forcing companies to go above and beyond to retain or attract them. Ann Gaviola explains what some firms are offering employees to stay or to hop on board.
This is the 3-bedroom, 1,500-square-foot house that 30-year-old Ian Blekta is moving into with his girlfriend. This first home purchase made possible with a $20,000 bonus from the company he works for. The catch, he has to stay with the company for at least 3 years.
We're excited. It's hard to describe, right, when you've been waiting so long to own a home and finally the time is here.
In a tight labor market, incentives like this go a long way.
When we went into the brainstorming sessions for this program, we really wanted to make it impactful. You know, more than an extra day of holiday.
A recent survey by staffing firm Robert Half shows that companies are going the extra mile to attract workers. 40% are offering more paid time off, 37% better job titles, and more than 1 in 3 are offering signing bonuses.
It's one of the toughest labor markets to hire great engineers. And what makes it tougher for us is we're looking for the top 1% within that pool.
Laser Technologies is a tech firm with a twist, offering its staff the option to work fully remotely and shoulder to shoulder with coworkers as often as they want. The company headquarters will remain in Toronto, but its traveling office will change locations several times a year.
Our first country's Costa Rica. In addition to that, we're planning on Uruguay, the UAE, and several other places in the U.S.
In a job market like this, the onus is on employers to do everything they can to make work feel less like work.
Across our team of 60, people get multiple offers from, Square, Shopify, Facebook constantly with numbers that are astronomical. But beyond that, what they really care about is, do I get flexibility?
Better benefits, more money, and all kinds of perks. Recruitment experts say the pandemic is a chance for workers in high-demand industries to ask for exactly what they want, knowing that if they don't get it, other opportunities abound. Ann Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Still ahead, the highway that went nowhere and how it sunk over $1 billion along the way. It's costing Montenegro more than $1 billion to build one of the world's most expensive highways. The tiny Balkan country has borrowed most of that from China, doubling Montenegro's state debt. The loan has left the country at the mercy of Beijing and desperate for a bailout. As Redmond Shannon explains, building the highway, which doesn't even go anywhere yet, has far-reaching consequences.
Montenegro is a spectacular destination. It's easy to see why this nation relies so heavily on tourism. So when the pandemic hit, the consequences of a government gamble to boost the economy came tumbling down the hillside. It immediately struggled to pay off $1 billion loan to fund a small stretch of this Chinese-built mountain highway.
It's one of the most expensive highways in the world per kilometer basis. I wouldn't speculate on why the price is so high, but we need to find ways how to remain sustainable and finalize the highway.
The highway is another brick in China's Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing's global infrastructure investment strategy. When the bell tolled on repayments, it was reported the Chinese state bank could seize Montenegrin assets or land if installments were missed.
Calling the previous government reckless would be probably a compliment. Montenegro would not be the first case of China seizing important assets as a collateral, but Montenegro would be the first one in Europe.
Montenegro is part of NATO and could join the European Union in the next decade. In April, the EU refused a bailout request, despite China's leverage on its borders.
The second option is the one we are not seizing assets, but we do expect political loyalty and political friendship from that government in return. That can, for example, imply that you don't vote in favor of sanctions against China.
But this month, private banks in the US and France helped refinance the loan, taking on a risk they didn't need. Washington denied involvement, and the EU is staying quiet about it.
They were afraid probably that other countries with similar financial problems might go to the European, to Brussels and ask for help in reprogramming their debt.
But it's a dilemma for the EU. Pretending it doesn't care is bad publicity in its own backyard, where China and Russia are competing with it for influence. In the meantime, the highway is far from finished, an expensive road to nowhere in a country at the crossroads of Eastern Europe. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Up next, a heartwarming homecoming for a Canadian Olympian after making history in Tokyo. Double the excitement for Canadian swimmer Kylie Moss at the Tokyo Olympics. The 25-year-old from Ontario scored her second silver medal at the Summer Games, this time in the women's 200-meter backstroke. It's the fifth medal that Canadian women have won in the pool. Moss's silver brings Canada's medal count to 12, and that puts us 12th in the overall standings, with 3 golds, 4 silvers, and 5 bronze medals. So, what happens when the athletes are finished their events? Under Olympic COVID protocols, they must leave Tokyo within 48 hours after their competition ends. Calgary's Haley Daniels is one of the athletes who has touched down at home, having made history. Cami Kepke has more.
She may not have won gold, but Hayley Daniels will always be first. The Calgarian is the first Canadian to compete in the inaugural women's canoe slalom at the Olympics, a victory in a decades-long fight for gender equality in the sport.
We can celebrate that we had one step forward in the Tokyo Olympics. It was like paddling in a swimming pool outside. With not a lot of refreshing moments, but I couldn't help but smile at the start line, just knowing that that we were amongst first.
Mom Karen hadn't seen her daughter for 7 months, but says Hayley's journey to Tokyo started before she was even born.
We were whitewater canoeing down the Kootenay River as I was pregnant with her, and it's very cold down the Kootenay and quite wild. And we tipped over, and I just held on to her, and I said, it's okay, we're going to be doing a lot of this.
After the whirlwind of the games, seeing family, friends, and the next generation of athletes greet her at the airport is as great as any prize Daniels could ask for.
Seeing them here today and the big smiles on their face, under their mask, of course, knowing that they're excited to get on the water, I mean, that makes it all worth it.
The second I saw her, I was just like hopping with excitement. I want to be like Hayley. I want to make it to the Olympics if I can. Yeah, that's my dream too.
Hayley's father, Kimberly, is also making history as the first openly transgender official at an Olympics. While father and daughter blaze trails, they hope to see more backing for women's sports year-round.
We need to support women, and we need to support women in sports specifically. And so I am so happy that we're finally gender equal, but there's still work that needs to be done.
And when a Canadian woman someday medals in C1 slalom, it will be in part because of the path Daniels helped pave.
Cami Kepke, Global News.
Good for her. And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Eric Sorensen. Tonight, your Canada is the granite shorelines of Cranberry Cove, not far from Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia. Please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Have a great night.